hold on. We'll be talking about, I was just starting the recording here on Zoom. Today we'll be talking about promoting social justice in qualitative research. And this is a topic that we talk about a lot indirectly when we are learning, teaching, mentoring people in qualitative research, but we have never really spent time digging deep and learning from the experts, because social justice is a whole different field by itself. But we believe that in qualitative research, if we're doing it well, really we are trying to give a voice to participants. We are trying to empower people most of the times, not all the times. And so today, this is the heart of it. And I'm really, really excited that we get to hear from the expert, because Dr. Cohen-Miller has done a lot of work in this area, and not just research, but publications, speaking, and projects. I mean, you name it, it's quite a lot of accomplishment that she has. So let me just quickly introduce her, and then we'll jump right in this conversation. Dr. Anna Cohen-Miller has a PhD and is an award-winning educational leader focused on equity and inclusion in higher education. So for those who are in the universities, and I believe many of you who are joining us are joining from higher education. By the way, please indicate to us on Facebook exactly where you're joining us from, which university, if you're attached to a university, or if you come from a school, it's not a university, and that's perfectly fine. Elementary school, high school, that's perfectly fine. Please tell us where you're joining us from and which country, because we have many countries represented usually. So Dr. Anna Cohen-Miller is a TED Talks and keynote speaker and internationally renowned qualitative methodologist who has drawn in grant funding of over 1.5 million US dollars. I mean, that is a portfolio that you don't easily find with educators. These are some of the things that you find with the people who are in sciences. So that tells you quite a lot about her and her achievement and her expertise. She specializes in arts-based methods to amplify the voice of historically marginalized communities. And I remember in the Sage Handbook for Qualitative Research in the Asian context, she contributed a chapter exactly on that. So for those of you who have that, or you may have that book in the library, you may read that chapter on arts-based research in the qualitative research. And Dr. Cohen-Miller has facilitated positive outcomes in international interdisciplinary teams with an emphasis on compassion and transformative learning to build educational and research capacity in developing context internationally. She has spearheaded cutting-edge scholarship, connecting students, schools, research, and communities, along with the successful supervision of master's and doctoral students, providing curriculum design and implementation from early childhood education through graduate level. You're going to get to know more about her as we discuss, as we hold this conversation. But, and I'm going to eventually share a website with you. It's, I mean, I feel so small in front of Dr. Anna Cohen-Miller. I want to welcome you on behalf of Qualitative Research Connect, Dr. Anna. Welcome to this program.
Thank you so much, Dr. Safari. This is amazing to be here. And, you know, I feel so lucky to have international collaborations throughout the years. So this is a prime example of that we haven't met face to face, but we've been in touch over the years through the Asian Qualitative Research Association when I was in Kazakhstan and Central Asia. And now I'm in Europe, I'm in Spain and working in Norway. You're in the US, you are in Kenya, and we've maintained that. And that's a key aspect of this community, of this worldwide qualitative community. So thank you so much for the invitation and welcome everyone who's here.
Thank you so much. Indeed, we have been collaborating with Dr. Anna for a long time. For those who are members of ACRA, mainly in the Philippines, you probably have seen her speak at some of the events and the conferences. I mean, I'll give you some information about her if you want to contact her, but let's go to the conversation. What drew you to qualitative research? I want to start from going way back to the beginning.
Sure thing. And so thank you again. And just so y'all know, my answers will likely interrelate and overlap. And that's one of the ways in which I draw people together also, is to recognize the ways in which we have similarities and that we have commonalities. And so I'll go ahead, we'll go through the questions and we'll see, and I'll be able to elaborate. So I think qualitative research, I first came to it back when I was studying in my undergraduate degree, and I focused on anthropology and linguistics. And so I brought together these two different fields that there wasn't a degree at the time, but I was interested in the way that language and culture come together, how it affects the way in which we understand one another, whether that's through popular culture, which was one direction I studied actually in Spain at the time as well, to see how did translation work in films and what was the difference when we use dubbing. You know, I'm sure that y'all have seen, right? Dub films versus, or subtitles, right? Versus dubbing. And what's the choice of word that's used and what does that reflect for the individual? And so that's where it started, when I knew, like, oh, technically I am looking at qualitative research. I'm trying to understand people and experiences.
Interesting. You know, I'm finishing this research study, the biggest that I've ever done in my life, qualitative research study. It's grounded theory, and I'm trying to look at how people progress from being heavily quantitative researchers, researching in university, to becoming a university that has qualitative research integrated in that. And one of the things that came up that you have just mentioned is that there are certain fields that lend easily to qualitative research. And in your case, you got both of them, linguistics and anthropology. This makes sense why qualitative research would come automatically in play, because you are dealing with two fields that deal directly with human issues. And to say that you started that all the way to at the bachelor's level, that's impressive. Did you have qualitative research classes in the bachelor's program?
Exactly, right. Your research sounds really fascinating. I would love to hear more of what it is that you're finding in those directions, because this is in moving from just quantitative and the way in which society has thought for so long, right? We need to have numbers, and numbers are unbiased. And yet we know that that's not the case. Every number, there's bias behind it, every researcher, and that's okay. And this is one of the things that I try to help people through, whether you're doing quantitative or qualitative, mixed methods, cooperative research, that we bring ourselves. And if we can articulate who we are, and you were mentioning the different disciplines, it then helps give people an idea of where you come from. So back with the anthropology and linguistics, so this was looking at an interdisciplinary, how do these disciplines come together? I moved on and continued, was interested still in qualitative research, and then integrated education. So again, into an interdisciplinary field for a master's, and then continuing to specifically study interdisciplinary learning and teaching. So how can we put this into practice? And what does this mean? What does qualitative research, what do the experiences of individuals in education, as teachers, as leaders, as people within organizations, how are we all affected? And that's part of understanding culture and language. And one other point before we go on, disciplines also change over time, right? So you're so right, Safari, that like embedded within anthropology, for instance, is understanding culture. And the history of anthropology is terrible in terms of justice, right? There was what was called armchair research, where white, wealthy, privileged men would sit back and say, I think I know what is happening in this other place. You know, these people that are different, this is what it must mean. And so thankfully, over time, the world and research is catching up to recognize we can't just be separate. We have to actually talk to people. We have to be humble. We have to be willing to learn. And that's where, being expert is great, and yet I like, I recall when I first moved to Kazakhstan, I referred to somebody as an expert there, and she had, a 30-plus-year career, incredible, right? Someone I looked up to so much and still do. And she said, I actually don't like that term expert, because once you're an expert, you can just lean back and you can rest on your laurels. She said, instead, I'm a learner and I'm still learning. And so that's this connects to how I think about justice and social justice and qualitative research in general, about always having this chance to learn.
I like the concept learn that you have emphasized on a lot. And to me, this is what makes a difference between, I'm not against quantitative research. I always make that very clear. My first doctorate was heavily quantitative. The second one was qualitative. But in qualitative research, we come with the mindset of trying to learn. We are driven primarily by, hey, what can I learn? How can I learn about what I'm trying to explore here? While in quantitative research, we come back from the mindset of investigation. I have the tools, I have the expertise, and I'm going to find out what is wrong in this place. And so I think that makes a big difference. Before we go to the second question, and welcome again for those who have just joined. For those who have just joined, please introduce yourself. Just tell us where you're joining from. That's all we need for now. And if you have questions, please post them in the Facebook where you're watching from. We'll take as many as possible once I'm done with the series of questions I've prepared for Dr. Anna. Second question that I have for you today: what specifically got you involved in qualitative social justice research? What drew you to that?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, so the most obvious for me step towards the social justice research was when I was in my PhD program. And I initially started the program looking, again, as mentioning, this interdisciplinary learning and teaching. And I came in and I was looking at gender and the way that popular culture affects the ways in which we understand our roles and responsibilities. And so the culture and how that affects us all around the world. And this is through, we mentioned before, learning. And so whether this is higher education and formal learning or informal learning, we see a poster on the wall or we go to a museum, how is something portrayed? What does the person look like? When I went to Kazakhstan, I was surprised at first that at the mall, a new mall opened up and the advertisement showed people that did not look like people in Kazakhstan. They looked like people from elsewhere, right? Lighter skinned and different kinds of clothes. And so what does that mean in terms of who I am and who I'm allowed to be and who I'm supposed to be? So I started with that. And then I became pregnant with my first child. And at the same time that happened, 3 of my other classmates also became pregnant. And so we were in this cohort together. And I could see that we were all treated completely different. So this idea of access. So some people had extreme medical issues and their faculty member would say, oh, well, you have to be in class. If you're not here on time, sorry, you're counted absent. Whereas other people, they had faculty members who said, no problem, I completely understand, right? This is something, I didn't have that, right? I didn't go through your experience, but I trust you. And here, let's redevelop the syllabus for you and make sure that you pass this on to others. I got that. That's what I received from a professor, Joellen Coriel, who is still, she researches and she's the top person in adult education in Texas and internationally. And she said, pass this on, right? This is how you treat people. You recognize that people have differences. And thankfully I could take her class from home online, and this was unheard of at the time. And this was because I was sick. I couldn't actually get in the car to drive to have that commute. And so this opened up, I started looking and said, well, what policies are there? There must be something to fall back on. Why are my classmates, they can't access this? That's not right? That's not just. And it turns out in the US at the time, and from what I can tell still, there aren't systematic policies that protect graduate students. That protect graduate students when they get sick. We have in the US, there's something called family medical leave act which allows, if you've been working in an organization of a certain size and you have a problem, you get sick, there's something comes up, then you can fall back on that and you can get some unpaid leave, sometimes a little bit of paid. And so the only way that pregnancy falls in that is that pregnancy has been counted as a disability. And so already like the framing of what it means to become pregnant, to become a mother, to embody this culture is then warped. And so I ended up shifting my research study and was really thankful that the department was open to researching doctoral student motherhood and mothering. So this was, so within a university itself, what is this like? What is it like across disciplines? What are these experiences? This had not been studied. It had only been looked at before, really within, once you're in the professorate, right? Within, what was referred to, or what is the academic pipeline is often thought of, oh, here, I get a tenure track job, maybe as an assistant, professor, a lecturer, and then you move up bit by bit. But instead, I was recasting and looking at doctoral students as the beginning of that pipeline. Because if universities put so much energy, so much money, and so much resources to develop doctoral students to enter the academic pipeline. And so this is where my ideas really became grounded and became clear about social justice itself within my work. Although then over time, and I can tell you a bit more, I could then trace it back through more reflexivity and critical self-reflection. And I found where that came from historically as well.
Interesting. I think now this explains, because I was reading about you. I came across some of the things you have done. It's about women scholars. Now this makes sense, and it links to something I always talk about, that when you're doing qualitative research study, you have to have interest in what you are trying to research. You have to have an advocacy. In fact, I was just writing exactly this very thing yesterday in the research study that I'm working on, that as a qualitative researcher, you must have an advocacy. And in your case, you were able to transform your personal experience, lived experience as a pregnant scholar, into a research study, which eventually became something for policy development for that many other people will benefit from today. That is really impressive. And that's what we want to see qualitative research do, where it's not just about, oh, I have learned something and then I'm published, I have my certificate or my promotion, that's it. No, what change are we bringing to society as a result of your research study? I don't know if you want to just jump in for a couple of seconds on that before you go to the next question.
Yeah, that's such an important point. Thank you so much for mentioning that, Dr. Safari. So, so you mentioned about, so what change are we bringing to society? What I've found then in my research is I didn't start with looking at what is it that I want to change. Instead, it's in understanding from others, what is it that the community wants? And it was in the research then with mother scholars, so those who identify as mothers and those who identify as scholars, that I kept on hearing, both formally, or so in research studies, and informally, people that I talked to in Facebook groups and elsewhere, that people felt alone in the US and in the UK and in other contexts. Mentioning, just even saying that you're a mother, demotes your other people look at you as less able. And there's research studies that show this, that as soon as you become pregnant, that then if you're not in your office, people assume that, oh, you must be, oh, that's so nice, you're at home taking care of the children. Whereas when a man, then someone identifies as a man, becomes a father, if he's not in the office before and after having a child, it's figured, okay, he must be somewhere working. And so, and this is where the cultural context matters, but what became clear is that so people felt alone. And so this is where I started the Mother Scholar Project. This is where, so the term Mother Scholar originated from Cheryl Matthias, who merged these words, the Mother Scholar, and she advocates on her signature, she's a Mother Scholar of boy-girl twins. This is who she is. She's putting it out there, even though she recognizes that some people will consider her less worthy and less able. And so with the Mother Scholar Project, this is and we can post the link to it, but just motherscholar.org, you can see just a list of women images. So it's a visual advocacy platform that showcases all around the world. There are mother scholars all around the world at all levels, from student to professor emeritus to librarian, all over the world. And so people send in their imagery of themselves, just a selfie, nothing professional. You're not trying to showcase, look, I can do this. Instead, this is who I am. I am a mother, I'm a scholar, I'm here, and these are my children. This is the role that I have. And that is then a form of advocacy that came out of the needs of the community. So I'm not coming in and saying, I know best, right? And this is a key aspect in terms of social justice that, you know, we've seen with transformative research. If you've heard of this, from Donna Mertens, and she has actually written the introduction to the last couple of my books, that transformative research is about, if you go into a community, you're working with an organization, you're willing to adapt, and you're working with the organization to see what it is. Maybe at first you think that, oh, you know, this community needs more education centers, but really you find out there's more after school areas that are needed, or pedestrian issues or health issues, something else comes up, and to be willing to then adapt and to incorporate various types of research. So you're saying, Dr. Safari, whether that's qualitative or quantitative or anywhere in between.
Thank you very much. It's amazing how you have been able to merge all these things, the different fields, bring them in education, qualitative research, anthropology, linguistics, and your own experience as a mother scholar. It's just phenomenal. It's mind-blowing. And I think eventually I need to get to read more about that from your publications. And I'm going to share with everyone the information. Just hold on there. I'm going to share that very, very soon with you. Let's go to another question, but you have actually started addressing it. If you could just spend another minute or so or two addressing it. Why should qualitative researchers care about social justice in higher education? You have kind of addressed that already, but yeah, can you go like deeper into this?
Sure. Yeah. Right. So why should we care? Right. And that's a great question, right? Like, why are we even doing this beyond just, okay, ticking a box and I'm getting a degree? And if that's all you want, then fine. Then that's all you do. But if you're here today, then you probably want something more, right? That you care, you want to make a difference in the world. And this is where my work, the last books that I've written, the work with SAGE research methods, which I'll mention also a bit later, is about becoming better as a researcher, right? So better, I'm putting quotation marks. So what is better? So, and that's for you to decide. But for me, the way that I define it, in the way with, you know, so when, you know, the book, the last one that's, you know, on the poster, the questions in qualitative social justice research, Nettie Blavin and I talk about becoming better as becoming more aware, becoming more socially just, recognizing that we can, to draw on what we've discussed a bit already, we can learn more, we can be humble, we can move forward and work with communities instead of on them, right? That we're actually talking to people and we're trying to understand. And so if you care, and this is what I talked about in, you know, the TEDx talk, was that if you care about the world and you want to make the world a better place, then look back to yourself, right? Become more aware. Who are you? Why do you care about these topics? Where are you going? What are you looking to do in the world? And as you understand more about yourself, then you feel more centered in who you are, which allows you to better hear other people's experiences, right? When they say something that maybe you don't agree with, okay, that's their experience, right? And that then helps move forward research, and also just justice in general, to be able to provide voice, to be able to provide and advocate and work with, develop coalitions that then are the people's, right? They're not mine. They belong to the people.
Thank you very much. It is true that change starts with ourselves, as you have just mentioned that. And when we are undertaking qualitative research, as I've said this in many of my publications, even in my talks, we can never be the same after conducting qualitative research. Every single qualitative research study affects us in a certain way. And the question is, what are we going to do with this truth, with this this information that we receive? Are we going to just share it, or are we going to actually do something about it to make the world a better place? And I think social justice is exactly what is needed to be strengthened in qualitative research, to make qualitative research even more important. Let's go to the next question. What are some of the social justice questions and topics that need more qualitative research? And I think your whole book is on that. Please share with us.
Sure, thank you. So I love this question because it gets beyond just social justice. And so I realized that with the book, Questions in Qualitative Social Justice Research in Multicultural Context, that I had it in my mind that, well, of course, social justice includes things to do with the economy and who has resources and who has access. And of course, it has to do with the environment and human rights. But what I realized is that not everyone else thought of it that way. And so I have shifted then in my phrasing, and this is where the importance of language comes in. And I have been further inspired and by Donna Mertens, for instance, and Norma Rahm and Toniano Igbuzi, who then talk about transformative research, indigenous research, decolonial research, and the specificity of bringing together, and this is something that Donna Mertens says about social, economic, and environmental justice, and human rights. And so as soon as I say social justice now, I am including economic, environmental, and human rights. And so my work now, the phrasing that I use is justice-centered. So the newest book that will be out later this year is about justice-centered qualitative research. And we're looking at the way that justice permeates then all of our lives and these interconnections. So the ways that we talked about, so different disciplines, and look, language comes in and culture comes into play. And I can give you one quick example. Do we have time for an example of this?
Yes,
right.
Please go ahead.
Great. So I'm in touch with one woman who I think I first met, must have been through Accra. So Nurul Nasser in Malaysia, and she's doing work on public health and qualitative research and photo voice. And she had reached out to me about photo voice. And this is something that, so if you're unfamiliar with photo voice, it's an arts-based method where participants take pictures. So on a very basic level, it's about the participants taking pictures of their experience, coming together, discussing it as a group, and advocating for what it is that their challenges are on a local or national, international level. So I have been in touch with her and helping answer questions and give insights about the photo voice. And as her research one part of it has come to an end, I've been able to see some fascinating and important overlaps between qualitative research in the arts and public health. So she was looking at, and she's committed to addressing ways in which malaria, one particular type of mosquito-borne malaria in Malaysia, can be reduced. And how do we address that? And so a lot of research, right, talks about, okay, well, too much water, laying around, or we need these other infrastructures. But one additional point that she brought up in one of her publications was about access to education. And so for me, this actually, I can feel it. I get goosebumps about this because this is something that I've noticed. I noticed also in Kazakhstan, and especially during COVID, right? We had one of the longest instances of lockdown in the world. And so the lack of access to education in Malaysia, and this one particular instance, it meant that, so not having enough Wi-Fi in the home meant that children then had to walk a distance to get Wi-Fi, a better signal, to be able to get access to schooling, to learning. And yet it was in that walk that then they would be infected by this mosquito-borne, so then end up with malaria from the mosquitoes during this walk. So the infrastructure, it wasn't just the way that I initially at least was thinking better from what I've read about, okay, we need these particular systems in place, but that Wi-Fi is related, access to Wi-Fi is related to, to malaria and to public health. These are the kind of things that we have to talk to the community and we have to understand. So this is an interrelationship that it's social justice that interrelates with environmental and economic. Who has access to Wi-Fi? Who has access? All of us, we're so privileged that right now we're online. We have some sort of way to connect. And so whether it's through a colleague or some kind of way, we have access. And that's something that we're incredibly privileged about. And so to recognize our privilege as we move forward is something that needs to continue to be recognized, and to see these interrelationships with the social, economic, environmental, and human rights.
Thank you so much for sharing this, these complexities that come into social justice. And the good thing with the social justice is that it's not just in education. It is, you may look at it from education, but with ramifications to many other aspects and dimensions of life. You can look at it from qualitative research. You can look at it from the perspective of the different designs that have come up in qualitative research in empowering people. I mean, it's massive, and it has room for each and every one to participate in the discussion. Before I go to the next question, where are you going to talk about some of the projects that you have, I just want to give some shout outs here to some of the colleagues who have been tremendous mentors in qualitative research in different parts of the world. Dr. Mildred in Sultan Gujarat, who brought to Accra more than 400 members to be qualitative research members. I'm glad to see you, and I was at your university just last month. I see Dr. Mary Grace de Guzman, AUP, thank you so much for joining. Dr. Capulso, we did some trainings on qualitative research together in Papanga, good to see you. Dr. Sunya Fukufuka, who is my mentor, my brother, joining from Tennessee, United States. Thank you so much for joining. That's the guru of grounded theory. Anybody who wants to look into that, talk to him. Dr. Christian Ekoto, we have published a lot of chapters together, joining us from Pennsylvania. Thank you for joining. Sir Doniver from IAS in the Philippines. You are my colleague, and it's good. And you have grown up to be a qualitative researcher. I'm sure you're doing some trainings these days. It's good to see you here. Dr. Carol Kingston from India, joining us from India. You just finished your PhD, your dissertation in qualitative research. It's so good to see you right here. Dr. Tuzan, who has been involved also in the Philippines, and many, many more. Dr. Mia Miano, I think from Batangas, I think that's where you used to come from, if I remember. So it's good to see all these figures that I know, and others that have just joined that maybe we have never met, but we have now met. Let's stay in touch. Let's go to the next question. What are the projects, Dr. Anna, are you currently working on that deal with social justice? I think you have many of them right now.
I do. And one of them, I will let y'all know if you're interested in being involved in.
Oh, definitely, definitely.
So that would be great. So I think the latest one, so I mentioned the book that's coming out at the end of the year. This is pretty much a follow-up to the questions in qualitative social justice research. So follow-up to this one that I've written called Transformational Moments in Qualitative Research. I have the image of it on my website that you can then see. So Transformational Moments in Qualitative Research, Method, Theory, and Reflection. And it integrates storytelling, really, of life-changing moments of researchers and practitioners, early career and very well-known scholars, to then highlight what that can mean for us, right? So as you then read one of these stories, you can then reflect back and think, well, what does that mean for me? Maybe I'm not doing research in this particular context, but this does apply in some way for me. What does that mean that I can also explore in terms of justice in my research? And embedded throughout are critical self-reflection questions. And the book you can read as a whole or as individual chapters. And it's received advanced praise and is recommended as as a must read for all qualitative researchers interested in justice. And so if you're interested also in, potentially an advanced copy, if you want to write a book review or you're thinking about this, then you can also reach out. Other things, we're mentioning that, so qualitative research connects with other kinds of research. And one particular direction that I'm interested in is looking at building into quantitative research, but starting with mixed methods research and social justice. How can we embed social justice in the teaching and learning of mixed methods? And some places are starting to do this, and you can see this in feminist mixed methods, and you can see this in a few other directions as well. Trying to remember I'm losing the names of some of the folks that I wanted to mention, but C. Deborah Lofton at Guilford Press has worked with some great folks to then bring mixed methods and justice forward. And so this is one direction as well, so a book proposal that hopefully will then come to fruition in the next few years. So mixed methods and justice, or social justice, as well as a special issue. If you're familiar with the journal Critical Studies and Critical Methodologies, this was started by Norman Dinsen. So a foundational, thinking about qualitative research in general. And this is an issue about a decolonial response to the war in Ukraine. How is it that we're moving forward? What can we do, right? This is so much pain, right, is happening right now. And again, to think about, it doesn't just have to be this specific area, but what can we learn from this for other contexts, right? Unfortunately, war and colonialization it's not only focused in Ukraine, right? This is happening around the world and has happened. So what can we do as a response? And so then the last thing this is where in particular that I would invite y'all. So I am working with Sage Research Methods. They reached out to me. They have a whole set of how-to guides. And so if you're affiliated with a university, you likely have access to these. And so these are very direct, they follow a template. It's very clear. Here's an introduction and definitions and how to use it and follow-up questions. And they've asked me, and so I'm leading, editing their collection for decolonial research and diversity. And so I have a whole set of folks that are moving through that process already, but they've recently told me that if there's additional people, they're happy to then help allow more people to come in and to let this be an additional deadline. So first set of folks have reached their first deadline. And now, so if you have topics related to diversity and decolonialization, or you're interested in talking about how you might be able to write a how-to guide, then also please reach out. I would love to hear about your work.
Thank you so much. That's quite a lot that is going on at the same time. I have two questions, follow-up questions on that. While I wait for people to have comments on whatever you have talked about so far, we're coming to the end of the question. So I will be saving a few minutes for those questions and comments. Number one, how, as a mother, as a faculty, as a researcher, do you manage all this? Because this is one of the things that I've been confronted with whenever I'm speaking out there. They say, we don't have time. But here you are in so many projects. How do you manage that?
Thank you for your question. This is a question in particular I used to get a lot when my work was primarily focused on motherhood and mothering. How can you be a mother and do all these other things? And so the first question that I often reflect back would be to think about, okay, would you also ask a father that? Right, and you mentioned fathers already. So this is not about your question, Dr. Safari. This is more for people to think in general, right? Like, well, and this happens with people's, experiences and living different places. Oh, I would ask this person, especially one direction that I'm interested in is about disability and disability inclusion, right? Like, well, so some people might say, oh, you're in a wheelchair. How do you manage in a wheelchair? Well, how do you there's other disabilities that we can't see that are invisible. And so this is for just kind of a critical self-reflection for us to think about what questions are we asking and where can we gain the insight? So then the insight from it for me is about finding what we've talked about, finding these overlaps, what is important, and recognizing that not everything has to be done by me. I don't have to be the expert in everything. And this was something that Sharon Ravitch out at the University of Pennsylvania. So when I worked in Kazakhstan, I had this wonderful opportunity for professional development out at UPenn. And she's a well-known methodologist, and she was talking about how she doesn't have to know about every methodology. She doesn't have to be the best in everything. So she's a qualitative methodologist. She also knows and does work on mixed methods, and she can do quantitative, but she's not the specialist in it. She says that she knows who to go to. So know enough of who to go to, create those networks, and recognize then that we can build upon each other's strengths. And so this goes back then to what I was mentioning about us being able to have humility and to learn, that to be able to say, I don't know best, right? So great. We're in this worldwide community to recognize that I'm not alone. And this is one of the key tenets of the forthcoming book, is that we're not alone in this. You don't have to figure out whether grounded theory was mentioned, or phenomenology, or interviewing, or focus groups, or photo voice. You don't have to figure it out on your own. There's this wonderful community that the qualitative connect, right? You get to ask questions. People get to be connected. You get to then think of and keep a list of people that you're interested in connecting with, and just write to them, right? And see, some people might say they have time and might see your message. Other people might not. And that's okay. Just keep on reaching out. And so finding then the time is then about prioritizing what works. And when it starts to get overwhelming, realizing that something needs to shift, right? There's a discussion of, how do you balance it all? It's not all balanced, right? Or not all from day to day. So one day it might be much more on the work side. One day it might be much more on family or on self-care. But I can't help anyone else unless I'm okay, unless I've slept, unless I've eaten, unless, for those of you who have flown before, right, on the airplane, in the announcements at the beginning, they say, you need to put on, and in case of an emergency, the air masks will come down. If you're next to a child, they don't say, make sure that the child's okay first, or, the older person who needs help. They say, no, you have to put it on yourself first. And it's so counterintuitive, especially for caretakers, especially for mothers that have been taught for so long, socially and culturally and media, that we need to take care of others first. That instead, if I need to have the oxygen, so then I can help others. And so if we all put on our oxygen mask and realize, okay, I'm in a place that I'm okay, then I can move out and I can help others, and I can be the change that is needed in the world, or I can be guided and get out of my own head, right? That instead of me thinking that I need to change things, get out of my own head and actually listen to other people and what is needed from them, what voices want to come forward, and how can I facilitate that?
Thank you. I get three answers, strong answers from what the answer that you gave. Number one, we need to collaborate. And this is something that we cannot emphasize enough on. Many times, people who come from the colonial perspective of research and scholarship, if I may use that term, they come with a mindset that I have to be the one going up and being the only one publishing, the only one getting awards, the only one having the best of this, the only one speaking in a conference, and so on, that they get into burnout. You will find that many people who are really doing a lot of good work, like Dr. Anna, part of it is because they are working with other people. Nobody can be best by themselves. Each one who you will believe is really, really good is because they have been a part of, they have collaborated with others, they have learned from others, they have gotten strengths from others and used them in their own work. So collaboration, you are able to achieve a lot. Some of you remember that we published the Sage Handbook of Qualitative Research in the Asian context last year. We had, can you imagine, we had people from Europe, from Asia, from the US, from Africa, from Latin America, from Central America, from the Caribbean. I don't know if we had anybody from Canada, but what I'm trying to tell you is that even though the handbook was for Asia, we knew that we would still learn a lot. And what we did, we matched people coming from those different places with the people, scholars in Asia, so that the international perspective is injected in, and the Asian perspective is amplified, because then they were able to come up with a synergy that wouldn't have been achieved if it was only Asians writing, only non-Asians writing. The second thing that I learned from here is to have priority. For you to be able to do a lot of things, each and every one of us is busy. We all, as somebody said, we all start the day with 24 hours. Dr. Anna doesn't have 48 hours in a day. She has 24 hours, and each one of us has 24 hours. Each one of us has responsibilities: parent, teacher, researcher, member of the community, member of the church if you are a church goer, a member of a political movement if you are a part of that. So many roles that we play. And we have to be able to manage the 24 hours that we get every day. That means we need to prioritize. We need to be able to know what is important from what is not important. We need, as I have told somebody, we need to learn to say no when it is necessary to say no. Many times, many of us come from cultures where saying no is kind of offensive, it's bad, it's looked at negatively. We as scholars, we need to learn to say no if it's something that is going to affect our plans that we're doing. And here I'm talking about things like scholarship, things like social justice work, things like your family, your personal life, your personal time. We need to learn to say no to certain things that we feel are not important. And as long as we continue being people pleasers, we may not manage time very well. And of course, we need to spend a little bit less time on social media. As long as it's not the qualitative research platform, you can always spend as much time as you want there because you'll be learning qualitative research. The third thing I learned was to have your me time. This is very important. This is something that I try to do over the weekends to try to disconnect. I'm a churchgoer. I go to church, and then in the afternoon I completely disconnect. I may use that time to connect with friends. Sometimes we have friends at our house, just chilling, because that re-energizes you for the coming week. And when you start the new week, you are fresh, you are more focused, and you can do much better. Of course, exercise is something that we cannot ignore. Exercise and good diet, they all come in right there. Let's go to the last question. And
can I actually add one
sure.
thing with
go
this?
ahead.
That was beautiful summing up. And so what I was thinking about this, so one, what y'all did with the research in the Asian context in bringing together the mentoring and mentees. So when you first suggested that, oh, okay, I'm going to work with somebody that I don't know, I was a little shocked at first, and it took some effort, and yet it was a brilliant model. And this is something that across my work that I then, as was mentioned about collaboration, but also then that way, how can I empower other people? How can I work? I could write this myself, but also maybe there's somebody else that I can bring in their voice. So I was writing I was invited to write on the encyclopedia entry for mother scholars for Oxford bibliographies. And I brought in a colleague, right? So I could do it myself, but instead Jessica Levedo has incredible, powerful work, and she could be brought in as well. And so even it doesn't have to be just early career. This is, she's well known, for instance, and in other cases also, how to bring these networks together. So that's one thing. Thank you so much for that example. In terms of us all having, these ideas all relate for me to the efforts that I'm making and that are important for us to showcase an organizational culture. So in terms of prioritizing or saying no or having time off on the weekend, if we're in a leadership position in particular, then we have more social capital, and we could have things in, as I've seen, in email signatures that say, I respond during the weekdays between these hours. And that shows other people that you're not expecting them to respond, or even I've seen, please don't feel pressured to respond outside of business hours, whatever those hours are for you. So it showcases that, oh, work is not intended to be 24 hours, right? That it's okay to have priorities, that it's okay to talk about being a caretaker, being, having hobbies, being connected to one's faith, that my 24 hours of, as I thankfully learned from other people, where I was mentioning about disability inclusion, is different for other people. If other people have dyslexia, if other people have, physical challenges, ADD, mental illness, that their 24 hours, they may need much more time to do the exact same thing that I'm doing. And every time that they're willing to stand up, each of us are willing to stand up and say, this is in a safe way, right? If we feel like we can say it, this is something that I struggle with, this is who I am. And then others can learn from that. And that's a way to empower and also change organizational culture as a whole, to recognize that we're individuals, and to share and be open to let other people know, tell me, right, about what you need. This is what I think you need, right? This is, the framework or the flexibility or the resources that I think you need, but I'm not you. So if there's anything else, let me know. So again, so if you're in a leadership position, then these are things that you can do, that you can showcase. If you're not in a leadership position, then bring other people together so you have a more powerful voice. And so it's not just the one person saying this, and then you can be pointed out and eliminated, but instead, this is where ideas of unions or ideas of collective action in general are, you come together, you find your organizations that then can help you and provide the voice.
Thank you so much. I wish we would have the whole day to talk about this. It's just exciting. It's really exciting to hear from somebody who has the expertise on social justice in qualitative research. That's impressive. We're going to the last question, and we are finishing in 5 hours. I'm going to give, 5 minutes, not 5 hours. I'm going to give you just a couple minutes, maybe two to 3 minutes. Tell us where people can learn about your work and contact you. I have your website here, and I know many people always ask me everywhere I go, need some keynote speakers, plenary speakers, and so on. What are some of the things that you enjoy talking about in the conferences, if ever people are interested in inviting you? And for the audience, I have just shared her website on Facebook. You can just click on that link and you'll be able to see all the magnificent projects, huge, robust projects she's been doing, all the different talks she has had. You can do a whole lot, and you can contact her from there. There's a place where you can click on contact, and you can do that. But what are some of the areas where you have done a lot of your presentations, or you enjoy presenting on? Obviously, social justice is part of it.
Exactly. Absolutely. Thanks so much. So yes, so you have the website. I'm also on LinkedIn and academia.edu and ResearchGate. Those are all linked also in the website. I love speaking and working with others. And so this is, I think of it less as here I'm speaking at, and ideally I would be able to see y'all, right? That we could talk and we can interact, and that there's chances that we're speaking with. And it's about developing confidence in moving forward. So when you feel stuck, what is it? How do you move forward, right? Remembering you're a part of a community. How do you do that? Using arts-based methods, or sometimes are referred to as contemplative inquiry. And these are things that I've learned, for instance, from Valerie Jancic and Kakali Bhattacharya, and to enhance also, so social justice research itself, justice-centered research, so implementing it, but also how do we teach and learn about this? How do we develop then the pedagogy? How do we implement it within organizations? How do we affect change in a way that's meaningful for those that we're working with? And so a lot of this work started through looking at the effects of culture as a whole, and this still permeates throughout, looking at gender, looking at embodied identities and interdisciplinarity, and looking at these intersections. And so understanding, again, that we can center ourselves, and how do we do that? How do we move forward in ways that are justice centered, and that I can help meet you where you are to then reach the goals that you're looking to reach. So I'm so honored that I got to be here, and I hope to see y'all. I hope y'all reach out. Really looking forward to it. And Dr. Safari, always a pleasure to see you and to work with you, to collaborate with you. I'm excited about the next steps.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anna Cohen Miller. And you have heard all the different things that she talks about. So if you want to invite her to your conferences, please use that website. It has been really a great pleasure having you. I want to, before I say bye, I add this, I just wanted to acknowledge Dr. Grace Saban, the Vice President of Adventist University of the Philippines, who was also a contributor to our Sage Handbook, Dr. Ablaza from Baguio in the Philippines as well, who was also a contributor to this, and Dr. Janina Petre from Romania, who was also contributed to this handbook, and is again showing that importance of collaboration. We get to learn from one another. We get to build on each other's strength, and of course, well, sometimes you get to find somebody and feel like I should have just done the work myself. But you know what? Part of us as scholars is to empower other people, to mentor other people so that they can become scholars, because we want as many scholars as possible. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming today. I hope you were able to enjoy this session just as much as I did. And we look forward to having you again next time. I cannot tell you when. I just have this whenever there's an opportunity, when I find a very good guest. So thank you so much for sharing, for coming. Thank you, Dr. Anna, for sharing this. The passion that you have for social justice and equality research is amazing. I look forward to many of your books. And if you want to get some of her books and the articles, please read, just move around that website. I'm reposting it here again so that you can get more information about her. You can buy some of her books that are also listed there on her website. Thank you so much. Good night in the Philippines, good afternoon in Europe and Africa, and good morning in the United States. Everyone, you take care until we meet again.
Thank you so much.